Welcome back. We're reading Martin Heidegger's Metaphysics. He is a German philosopher. Uh, Pretty wordy, but once you kind of wrestle with his work, you really start to kind of comprehend his language and it kind of gets smoother down the road. Alright, we're on his paragraph 90, which is page 130. Nevertheless, we have placed this separation not in the first, but in the third position. At first we will try to elucidate its content in the same way as we elucidated the first two. Once again, we begin with a generalized characterization of what now stands opposed to being. Okay, so we're going to see with what is opposing being. What does it mean to think? We say, okay, this is German, Der Mensch denkt und Gott lenkt. Man proposes, God disposes. Literally, human beings think and God controls. That's a cool German thing. Here, to think means to devise this and that. To plan. To think about something means to set one's sights on it. To think evil means to intend evil. Andenken means not to forget something. Here, thinking means memory and remembrance. Das Andenken und das Gedenken. We use the turn of phrase just to think something up, that is, picture it, imagine it. Someone says, I think it's turning out all right. That is, that's the way it seems to me. I look at it the way and am of this opinion. That's a pretty solid definition of like what it means to think. To think in an emphatic sense means to think something over. Okay, emphatic sense. To think in an emphatic sense. To deliberate on something, a situation, a plan, an event. Thinking also serves as the title for the labor and work of the one we call a thinker. Of course, all human beings think as opposed to animals, but not everyone is a thinker. Ain't that the truth? What do we gather from this linguistic usage? Thinking relates to what is future as well as what is past, but also to what is present. Yeah, thinking is not bound to just one moment of time, right? Thinking brings something for us, represents it. This representing always starts of our own accord, is freely at our disposal. So thinking is always at our own disposal, and that accord of it and the representing of it is before us and is free to do so. This freedom is not arbitrary, but is bound by the fact that in representing, we think upon and think through what is represented by analyzing it. Yes, all of us nerds who like to analyze and think, by laying it out and reassembling it, but in thinking, we not only set something forth before ourselves of our own accord, and we do not just analyze it in order to cut it apart, but we think over what is represented and follow after it. Exactly, analyzing something doesn't mean you discombobulate it and just, disfigure it. You're actually looking after it, seeing where it goes, contemplating on it. Good point. We do not simply take it just as it strikes us, but we try to find the way to get behind the thing, as we say, to experience how it stands with the thing in general. We form a concept of it for ourselves. We seek the universal. At first, we will highlight 3 of the characteristics of what is usually called thinking that we have listed. So we're going to have some 3 characteristics of what is called thinking. 1. Representing of our own accord a distinctively free behavior. Ooh. So thinking is a free behavior. 2. Representing in the mode of analytical connection. Analytical connection. Yeah, thinking is definitely can be analytical because you have to connect and reason. 3. The representational comprehension of the universal. Ooh. In each case, according to the area in which this representing moves, according to the degree of freedom, the sharpness and sureness of the analysis and the breadth of the comprehension, thinking is either superficial or deep, empty or full of content, non-binding or compelling, playful or serious. Wow, that's really good comparisons right there. Wow. Superficial or deep, empty or full of content. That's why when people say things like empty platitudes, it's like there's nothing there. So many speeches have nothing there. It's just like words. There's no depth to it. There's no meaning behind the meaning. Non-binding or compelling. Language and thinking that doesn't bind you or compel you. Playful or serious. That one's pretty self-explanatory. But none of this yet shows us why it should be thinking that attains this fundamental orientation in regard to being that we have pointed out. Thinking along with desiring, willing, and feeling is one of our faculties. Yes. Those definitely do all go together, but notice thinking is like the first, right? You have to think what you desire, you have to think what you will, you have to think what you will feel. When you feel, you think. When you desire, you think. When you will something, you think about it. Right? In all our faculties and modes of behavior, we are related to beings, not just in thinking. Certainly, but the distinction being and thinking means something more essential than the mere relation to beings. The distinction stems from the way in which what is distinguished and separated belongs inceptively and intrinsically to being itself. Oh, belongs inceptively. Look at that. Belongs inceptively and intrinsically to being itself. Heidegger just, boom, just dropping it on us. The heading being and thinking names a distinction that is, so to speak, demanded by being itself. So being and thinking is demanded by being itself. Connect those two. But in any case, such an intrinsic belonging of thinking to being cannot be glimpsed on the basis of what we have offered so far as a characterization of thinking. Why not? Because we have not yet gained an adequate concept of thinking. But where can we get such a concept? Is he going to say by contemplating the Dasein? When we ask this, we are acting as if there had not already been a logic for centuries. It is the science of thinking, the doctrine of the rules of thinking and the forms of what is thought. The logic for centuries, it is the science of thinking, doctrine of rules of thinking. Furthermore, it is the one philosophical science and discipline in which the standpoints and tendencies of worldviews plays little or no part. Furthermore, logic counts as a secure, trustworthy science. Well, he definitely has his faith in logic, doesn't he? It's trustworthy? Now, logic is, okay. So if you use, something could be logical, but it could be like if you have a solution to a war, and you say, well, this is the logical conclusion. Well, even if it's a logical conclusion, it might not be the best strategy because there might be something illogical that happens in the war. A surprise, something you didn't see, but then one could say that the logic of that is still useful, and that maybe even if it's a surprise, it's still logical and not unlogical. I don't know. Secure, that's a tough one. I mean, you could argue with that a little bit, right? I mean, you bet on the logic. If I throw this rock, it will hit something. That is logical, but it might not hit something, and that's another logical possibility. Or, I don't know, that's a tough one. Think about that more. It has taught the same thing since antiquity. True, one logician rearranges the structure and sequence of the various traditional doctrines. Yeah, that's kind of where I was getting at. Another leaves out this and that, still another makes additions from epistemology. Another supports everything with psychology. But, on the whole, a gratifying agreement prevails. Logic relieves us of the trouble of asking elaborate questions about the essence of thinking. Wow, it relieves us the trouble of asking elaborate questions. But what if, there's a benefit to asking such elaborate questions. I don't know if you just overly want to rely on logic, because logic has led to computers, and indeed computers are very logical, but they are not the best for nuance. It's a good point. I mean, again, he compares, the different fields, epistemology and then psychology competing, the different fields rearranging their logic in their ways and how it comes together to form a mass conglomerate of information. Interesting. What do you think, family? Heidegger got us thinking.